What's up, everybody? This is going to be episode 43 of An Untold Narrative featuring the lovely Alicia Pinckney. How do you say your last name?
Pinckney, 2 syllables, the color and then the knee.
Pinckney, perfect. Who is super high energy and very lovely. We met through Clubhouse, actually, of all places, and then have stayed connected through Instagram, other social media platforms. So this is the first time that we're actually seeing each other face to face via Zoom. For all our listeners on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can also check it out on YouTube. Alicia, thanks for being here. We'll start with what's your 30-second elevator pitch about yourself?
Oh, God. Well, first of all, thank you, David, for having me. And like you said, we did meet in Clubhouse, but I'm grateful for those moments of connectivity. And look how that's being able to continue throughout, our lives or whatever. My 30-second elevator pitch is I'm from West Philadelphia. Born and raised by the playgrounds where I spend most of my days. But I've been traveling the world for, over 10 years now, like whether it's living or just traveling in general because of my career. So I'm trained as a designer. I cut, sew, sketch, do all those things. And I was fortunate enough to find an actual career by designing for footwear companies throughout, whether it's Italy, Switzerland, the US. And I love art. I love anything in that room. And I love creating and meeting different people in this space.
That's so exciting. And I think that's why, we hosted a room around footwear design. And then you religiously showed up and offered this amazing perspective from the apparel side, which was, amazing for people to hear about. And it's amazing that today there's very little boundaries left in terms of cross-pollination of creatives, if you would, where
right.
you can go into different fields. You don't have to have a whole career in footwear design, not to say you can't go into apparel or if you have the basic skill set.
Right. No, I really enjoyed hopping on those calls because, like you said, I'm not an industrial design major. I'm not a product design major, but because of my career has literally been, I collaborate with footwear designers to create a head-to-toe collection. If I do collaborations, whatever's dropping in the latest hype beast world, I'll be that designer working on it with that footwear designer. So I'm touching and seeing footwear, the process all the time. And it's always been something that I've been interested in. I've always been sketching footwear just to get into it. And one of my good friends who's also a footwear designer, he's like, Alicia, you don't need to go to school, for footwear with being who you are. You're a designer, just sketch a day. 100%. And that's what I was doing. And I spoke to so many different people, even professors at schools like Savannah College of Art and Design. They were like, my best students are those who have that fashion design background. He was like, your work ethic, the way you're able to apply that same draping mentality to the last, it's an easy transition. So that's why I'm in those calls, because I'm like, I'm an apparel designer, but I'm in the footwear space. And I think a lot of people think that I design shoes, even though I don't.
Hey, that's okay if people know you for other things too.
Yeah.
So let's go back in time. You mentioned West Philadelphia, born and raised. How did you get into the creative fields? Are your parents creative, or did you just stumble into a class or a course? Do you have a degree in something specifically?
Yeah, so my family is creative. So growing up, I went to private institutions, and I was always the smartest in my class. Elementary school, I was a valedictorian. I was that girl arguing with the teacher about my grade, about my math test. 5 times 5 is this. I was that nerdy girl, but at the same time, I was also very creative. I got my first sewing machine when I was 12 years old, and I taught myself how to sew. And at that age, I was working with denims, my mom's old denims, making purses. I made a denim corset when I was 13 and wore it to my 8th grade career day because I knew I wanted to be a fashion designer in 8th grade. So I was self-taught in a sense, but I always bring it back to my family. So my mom's father and his side of the family, my grandpa, he was a Renaissance man. He did everything from carpentry to sewing to music to singing, painting, all of it. And I like to say that he kind of sprinkled his talent throughout all of us, because my sister, she plays the piano by ear. She, her husband plays music by ear as well. So my sister got that kind of side of it. She draws as well. But myself, I tapped really into, that design point of view, putting things together. I started actually putting things together by sewing and things like that. And I was also sketching a lot as well. I remember in elementary school, even though I was the smart girl in school, all my girlfriends would be like, Alicia, can you draw this for me? And literally I remember taking home like these sketches, bringing them back to school, and the layout would be like 4 of my best friends, and I would be styling us in different outfits, like a trucker hat and like a Von Dutch top shirt. And at that time, I didn't know I was doing fashion illustrations. I was just, taking sketches home and sketching my best friends because I'm a girl's girl. I was always in like a group of girlfriends, and so that's kind of how I got my start. And long story short, when I went to high school, I didn't have art classes on my roster because I was kind of that nerd. I had all the AP classes. I had all these things, and they didn't give us, the AP students space for art and things like that. But I was determined. So I like tracked down the art teacher, showed him my portfolio. He was like, all right. And like I ended up being in actual art classes for the first time in my life in my junior and senior year of college. And I'm so grateful for that because he was the first one who gave me a scholarship to take college level classes at a school called Moore College of Art and Design. And I was literally on the trolley every Saturday with my sewing machine because we learned how to make like bags from scratch. And from there, that was just like the catalyst of how I ended up going to school for fashion. I went to Philadelphia University, majored in fashion design. And then after that, I worked a bit in the industry. And then I ended up getting my master's degree in Italy. I won a scholarship to go abroad and get my master's in fashion design in Milan. So, I don't want to talk so much, but that's pretty much the trajectory to answer your question of how I got into it.
No. The
so
point,
much between.
the point of this is for you to tell your story. That's a wild ride. So you got into fashion at such a young age.
Yeah.
Like, I'm jumping ahead here, but the immediate question that comes to mind, and I tell people all the time, this is not scripted, but like, after so long of doing it, have you lost any sort of passion for it, or
No, I love it so much. I really love it, and I think that's why working in corporate. I think that's why my team, my managers, they're like always like, okay, Alicia, you should work on this category. They're always pushing me because that's where you can get bored. If you're in corporate and you're doing the same thing all the time and there's no energy, then I can see where the boredom comes. It depends on how passionate you are because some people have this role and it's like they're 9 to 5 and that's it. They're not really like looking for anything else. But for me,
but they're content with that. Like there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, it's nothing wrong with that. It's just, to each his own. And for me, and those are people, or I don't even know, I don't want to put people in boxes, but there's 2 different types of people and there's nothing wrong with either or. But for me, I just love like that momentum of always doing something new. And when I was at Timberland, I was fortunate enough that I was working on so many different things. My previous role, I was leading the whole business unit for women's, lead designing that whole category because it was the first time they brought it in-house. So they saw how like, I was always looking for more. And, even on the side, I was always doing my own projects. I had my own menswear brand at one point. And then even all throughout 2020, like from the start of COVID, I was just doing all these cut and sew projects. And a lot of people were like, oh my God. Because, when life gets so busy, it's hard for me to always have my sewing machine. But I think that people who have been following me on Instagram since like 2012, they see me in the studio back then and working on stuff. Then obviously my life happens and then I'm away from the machine for like 6 months or a year. But COVID in 2020, I think those followers who saw me from a while ago, they saw me back in my bag and like the sewing, they're just like, so, it's amazing the journey that you can get through social media as well,
Yeah, 1000%. I think I know there's a lot of negative stigma around it, right? It's like, oh, it sucks up your life and stuff, but you can really build amazing relationships and follow people's journey. Just filter everything in moderation, filter to the right people that you want to be inspired or motivated by. And I think that's awesome, right? And so take us back a little bit, right? So you mentioned you got your undergrad and then you got a master's degree. One, why did you want to get a master's degree? You said it was a scholarship that you won. Like, why were you applying for it? Were you always wanting to do a higher education? Because it's rare for a creative to have, like they say, left brain, right brain. Like you're wicked smart. You're doing the AP classes and then you're also really creative, right? Usually it's one or the other.
Yeah, it's so weird the way my brain works. But however, even though I'm creative, I can say that I find that technical stuff in the creative world. So I learned how to do like the draping and the pattern making. And for me, the numbers of pattern making and making sure you get the shapes right. And that was technical. That didn't feel creative, but obviously I was doing creative stuff. But to answer your question, and it's so funny that you mentioned that because I wasn't, like you said, I was a creative design major. It was no plan for me to go and get my master's. You know how you can meet other people who are like, you know, doctors or lawyers. They're like, oh, these are going to be my plans for school. That wasn't me. I was going to go get my degree and then move on with my life. However, when I graduated, the market or the economy wasn't that great for finding a permanent job. And for me, I was always hustling. I had an internship in college. You know, I got my first job in New York while I was in college. But everything was kind of like a temporary position or an intern position. Nothing was permanent. So I was like, you know what? I was already planning to take a trip to London and Paris as like my graduation gift to myself. And I was doing a lot of research. I always research. I suggest everyone always research. You're always learning about what's out there. But I ended up going to London and Paris. And when I was in London, I set up interviews with schools to do a tour to see, because at that point I was like, I want to move abroad, but I know I can't just move. I either have to be sponsored by a job or I need to go for school. So while I was there, I was like, okay, let me see what the school route is. Interviewed, did all these things, and just to see what the school campus was like. When I got back home to America, I was going to apply to that school, but then I saw another master's program in Italy, and it was attached with a scholarship and the deadline was quicker. Now, I love London. Like anyone, if you talk to anyone from when I was younger, I was like, oh, I need to live in London. You know, that's the capital of menswear, because I'm a menswear designer. I loved London. So I thought I was going to be living there, but I was like, let me apply for this one first because it has the quicker deadline. Applied for the master's. Before I can even apply to the London school, I found out that I won a first place scholarship, and the scholarship was through Vogue Italia.
Nice.
A global platform. And I was like, oh my God. First of all, I wasn't even planning to get my master's. So of course, financially, I wasn't planning. So, but the fact that, you know, this other school is going to give me a full ride, of course, I'm going to go move my life to Italy. So within 3 months, I moved to Italy and I started my master's program, which was the best experience of my life. And I really do believe that's what started the catalyst of why I've been living in 3 countries and now 6 cities in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Amazing experience.
So how long was the master's degree program?
It was only 10 months, but
oh wow,
yeah, it was it was a very accelerated program. It was 10 months. It was very related to like industry relations. I collaborated with a lot of companies overseas, whether they were international or Italian. So I actually collaborated with Timberland within my first few months in my master's program. And then I collaborated with Stone Island and BMW, was working with them for like a year after I graduated. And I got to see like the Stone Island archive. And I forget the name of the city, Ravari. I forget the name of the city. But it was a great experience. So even though it was only 10 months, I stayed in Italy for up to 2 years because I had opportunities to stay longer. You know, I was working with Stone Island after I graduated. But again, the economy in Italy wasn't that great. So I kind of had to be less selfish and start applying for jobs in America. And the moment I did, like the first job I applied to, they were like, hi, Alicia, congratulations. And I was like, I don't want to move back to America. No.
Oh, no.
But it was Adidas. So I was like, Alicia, get over yourself. This is a great opportunity. Move back to America. And
so your first job, like corporate job, was at Adidas?
I guess you can say, well, full-time, yeah, because I had other experiences with like temporary, permanent. So yeah, I guess you could say that then. Yeah, Adidas was it.
What, and just for context, what year was that?
This was 2016.
Okay, so not too long ago.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Because like I want to make a comment of like your career trajectory is like in a very compact, like impactful short period of time, because right before this call, I do a tiny bit of homework versus just spewing things out of my brain. But like I looked at your LinkedIn and it's just like all in like a condensed period of time. And I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, no, literally for me, because I graduated college in 2013. So literally for me, I started working, whether it was interning or doing whatever, in 2012. So from 2012 up until now, it was just like boom, boom, boom. And then obviously I took time off, you know, in school, but in school I was still like working with corporate companies, doing like special projects with like Napapiri and things like that. So it was like a, you know, a time frame, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, totally. How long were you at Adidas?
So when I got to Adidas, mind you, I moved from Italy straight to Boston. And when I did that, when I first started, I think I started like in August, they made a global announcement that my department, which was, I was working for the Reebok headquarters before they moved to Seaport.
Yep.
And they made a global announcement when we got a new president that my department, Adidas Sports Licensing, will be moving to Portland. So with that being said, yeah, as soon as I got there, and I was like, oh, I just got to America. Okay, fine. But so I didn't know who was going to be moving over. My manager didn't even know. And my manager had really great relationships with the NHL. You know, he does all these things like designs literally for the hockey teams. So the fact that my manager didn't know, my directors didn't know who was going going to Portland, I didn't know either. So at that time I started, you know, being back on the market, and Timberland kind of snatched me up
Nice.
by March that next year. So my time at Adidas was very short because I was kind of like the first one in my department to find a job as they were figuring out who was going to Portland. I could have stayed around, and because they literally contacted me around the time that Timberland contacted me, like, hey, Alicia, we can fly you over to Portland and see if you're interested in making this move with the team. But Timberland had already contacted me, and they were like, Alicia, this is in Switzerland. I'm like, all right.
So just because a lot of the listeners are up and coming creatives, designers, or like a year or two in the foot in the door, or they're applying. A lot of people haven't found their first job yet. What's it like juggling two different companies at the same time, and two huge brands, right? Like brands that anybody will recognize. Like, what's that thought process? Is it flattering? Is it stressful? Is it?
It's stressful. It is. I mean, it's both. It's flattering and it's stressful because, like, wow, you know, and especially for designers. Designers, sometimes we have this confidence in what we can do, but for some reason, the outside world is like that stamp of validation, and like you can be so great, you know, but if a great company doesn't want you, you feel like, oh, I'm horrible. But in reality, no, you're great. It's just maybe your portfolio wasn't what they were looking for or whatever. So for me, it was overwhelming in a sense that I was already prepared to kind of start my life back in America. And it was with a great company. It was with, you know, I had just finished like the project with Stone Island, and they advised me to go to this job in Reebok because they were like, Alicia, we can only offer you an internship. You're amazing. She was like, you know, Carlo Ravetti, you know, the founder, his actual daughter, she said to me, she was like, Alicia, I'm telling you this as a friend. She was like, run to Reebok. You need to run to Reebok because the only thing that Italy can offer you, which no matter how great you are, you know, Italy only does internships for very long times. And so she was like, Alicia, run to Reebok. And then if you ever want to come back overseas, it's going to be so easy for you because you want to have Reebok on your resume now. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, it Italian, maybe European as a whole, like the culture of corporate is a little bit different than in America.
It's slower.
It's harder to jump jobs and things like that. Like it's really more confined of like, okay, let's make a career out of this, or like you get put into a box really a lot easier.
It's really slow. And I'm happy how I grew within Timberland. Like when I left, I was leading the whole business unit and I was the youngest designer on my team. No one else was doing that. So I kind of broke the barrier of this whole European mentality that, you know, they had people who were like 27 being an intern. And I'm like, that's not really heard of in America. At 27, you're at least really into your career. But fortunately enough, you know, I had obviously built my resume before Timberland. And obviously I proved to them who I was. So I was able to grow and like, you know, really advance, you know, even sometimes beyond some of my colleagues. But yeah, your original question.
I forget what it was too. No, but this is really good. So you came back to America, and then you mentioned Switzerland. So how long were you in the States, or you just go immediately back to Switzerland?
I went back to Switzerland. So I moved. So I was literally just talking to my dad about this the other day. He was like, Alicia, the way you just said to me, he was like, you've done a lot in 5 years. Like, because literally I moved out of the country twice and moved to new cities twice within 5 years.
Yep.
So, because my dad was joking around like, dang, Bill, you can't keep a job. And I'm like, Dad, I was with Timberland for 4 years. And when I left Adidas, it wasn't my fault. It was because they were doing a transition. But so yeah, I moved to America in August, started the job in Boston. And then when I got the job at Timberland in March, I put in my last weeks or months, and my last month was like May in Boston. And then I went to Philly to kind of get my life together. And then they moved me to Switzerland in July. They moved my whole entire life over. I didn't have to pay for anything. It was amazing.
Why? Just for context, because I don't know the answer to this. I didn't know Timberland had an office in Switzerland.
Yeah. So, you know, Timberland is owned by VF.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, before they were owned by VF, when I was working with them years ago, they were just an entity based in London, and the design headquarters for apparel was based in London. There was like a big team of like British designers working on this collection. However, in 2015, VF bought Timberland, and when they bought Timberland, that's why. So life is so funny how timing works. Because remember, I told you I did like a capsule project for Timberland while I was getting my master's. That was like in the beginning of 2015. Here we are, January 2017, 2 years later. The guy who I did the project with, his career elevated within 2 years, and he became like the global director of apparel. He remembered the project that I did. He remembered that I was working on like a project with Stone Island, and we just kept in touch. And he was like, Alicia, if you're interested in moving back overseas, there's going to be a lot of jobs posted. You should apply. And at that point, I didn't know that the London office, they were all moving to the Swiss office where the VF International office is for like Dickies, the North Face, Napapiri, all that. So they were doing the same transition that my company was doing from Boston to Portland, but I didn't know. I had no idea. So I applied for the job, and like, I didn't know that he was basically giving me the job until like I actually had the job. So like I applied for it very nervous, and like at the end of the interview, I was thinking in my head that I wanted to show them like the project that I did 2 years before, because these guys didn't see it. I didn't work with them. And before I can even bring it up, he was like, yeah, our boss showed us this project that you did, and we were like, this is amazing. And I'm like, wow, a guy that I met 2 years ago held on to my project and showed it to these guys before my interview. And I was like, okay, so what's the next steps? When do I hear back from you? I hope that you guys can give me a call. And they laughed. They were like, our boss loves you. And then like 2 days later, I got the offer. And once I started working at the actual job, I didn't find out to 2 years in that I was their first international hire. So he was building up an international team, and I didn't know that I was the first international hire, which is really cool.
That's incredible. What is that? That's wild. And like, it takes a special person to be like, I say it about working at Vibrant all the time. Like, you got to have a special personality to zag more than you zig. Like,
I love that.
Yeah, you got to be flexible, right? Ultimately. Talk about the international experience from the perspective of like, what are some of the highs and what are some of the lows, right? Give people like a full scope, perspective, because I can't imagine it's all rainbows, butterflies, and pots of gold at the end of the
No,
right?
Absolutely not. So first of all, I want to touch on the fact that being abroad, being outside of your country, it's uncomfortable. You are really uncomfortable, and it depends on how you can adapt to that. There's so many frustrations that can come. I remember being really frustrated in my first years in Italy because of the hours that they would close their business. Like, they would close their businesses from like 1 to 3. And I'm like, I'm used to America where things are open. I get service. I would walk up to the mail slot and they're like, oh, we're closing. And I'm like, but I'm here. In America, it's like the customer's always right. They're in front of you.
Yeah.
I had to really understand like the culture of, that culture, that slower paced culture, that really enjoying your life culture, and I was frustrated a lot because, as an American who's used to like on demand stuff, I had to get used to that. And not only that, the language barrier. So I learned Italian, but obviously I wasn't 100% fluent when I first moved there. So I would have people who would welcomely, try to understand me. But then I would run into people who would literally just say, oh, I don't understand, just because I pronounced something slightly off. So there's a lot of like ups and downs with it. But again, it just depends on how you adapt yourself. And I think not a lot of people, there are some people who come into like a foreign territory and they try to project and push their culture on another culture, which isn't right. You're in this Italian culture, so you better adapt to this space and not, because it's very rude and disrespectful to kind of talk condescending about another culture or push your culture on someone else. So I'm the guest here. I need to adapt to this life, this world. And that's what I did. I got to know a lot of different people, and I grew a lot and, learned a new language. And it was so nice that even when I moved to Switzerland, I moved to the Italian region so I can keep my language, and keep it going. And, at the end of the day, it was a beautiful experience for me. And you touched on lightly about, it being rainbows and all these things. I had a great time there, but I think the reality of the fact is, even though my life has been so great 6 years abroad, my family's not there. You know, there's so many people who are fortunate to just, you know, drive to another state to see their parents, or, you know, fly over home for the weekend. And for me, my family is really important to me. And obviously I made the decision to to move. But, you know, as you get older and your priorities, I'm 30, and as your priorities change, you want that connectivity to be closer to your family. So for me, I knew at the top of the year of 2020 that I wanted to move back to America. Because I had already spent 5 years at that point. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, Alicia, why are you moving back? Like, because, you know, they call America the ghetto, especially with everything that's been happening. So they're like, why are you moving back here? And I'm like you said, everything wasn't rainbows and pots of gold. It was a great experience. I've seen so many parts of the world with my job. We were in Asia a lot, all over Europe, India, everywhere. But it's nothing like, you know, being closer to home. And now that I'm working for Nike, there's, you know, it's not going to stop all the travel. Like, my manager is already talking about all the places we're going to go now that we can travel again.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with being based in the US, you know, especially for a huge brand like Nike.
So we're going to get into that. Talk about real quick, because you mentioned that you started cultivating this idea of moving back to the States in 2020, but then the pandemic hit.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming that you spent that in Switzerland.
Yes.
And so talk about that experience, because I assume that being abroad in a non-pandemic year is very lonely for an outsider when you don't speak the language and things like that, and you have to spend a lot of time by yourself. But then you add on this extra layer.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Like, how you talked about like being able to like have time with your sewing machine and stuff like that, and I was the same way, right? Like I figured out like how to cut and sew t-shirts as well. Like,
yeah, I saw your brand, your painting, your NFTs, like,
yeah,
you like going in.
That was like the fun part of like learning and pushing yourself, even though you're stuck in four walls. Like, what did you do to get through that? Like, talk about that experience a little bit.
Yeah, so I can say pre-COVID, I never really found myself lonely because, you know, I built a community in the 5 years that I was there. And Milan was so close, you know, Italy was very close. So all the friends that I made in Italy were there. So I spent all my time in Milan all the time. Like, I had a nice social life abroad. But when the pandemic did hit, you know, I was obviously isolated because I lived alone. So I was isolated in that space. And at first I was enjoying it. You know, it was amazing because as social as I am, my friends think they joke around and say, oh, you're a party animal, which I'm not, but it's just because I like to have a good time. But as social as I am, I really value my alone time. Like, I really need that introverted space to myself. So when the pandemic happened, I was so happy. I was really, because I love my house. It's like my solitude. I love my space alone. And it was so great. And that's when I started like my upcycle projects, like, and putting that out there. I started painting. The only thing that I had and also where I lived, it's like the Mediterranean of Switzerland. So the weather was 100% amazing. So I would just go on long walks, go on hikes, things like that. But the only thing that kind of made me feel, you know, actually horrible during the pandemic is when everything started happening socially. That's when it messed with my mental. I was like, I couldn't handle it. And it was the fact that it was like a global reach and everyone was seeing it. And then at first my company didn't address it. And I kind of felt bothered by that because, you know, I was the only African-American woman in the entire, you know, organization in Switzerland. And that's including like North Face, all of that. So when it wasn't, not like I wanted someone to be like, hey, Alicia, are you okay? But the fact that we're a global brand and no one even addressed it on our side. But coming to find out, I found out they were addressing it only in America because we have the US office. But for me, I kind of still was taken aback because I'm like, you guys have an international team and you have one American on the team. Don't you want to make sure she feels okay? So, you know, that part I was really frustrated and isolated. But I'm happy. I'm a very vocal person. And the moment I brought that up to my director, because I called them out on it, you know, the moment I brought them up, they put me in all these meetings with all the leadership in like the US, like top leadership. And I was on that call, making decisions, making plans, figuring out how we're going to do all these things. So that kind of ended up being a silver lining and like being frustrated. And then I launched my nonprofit. So I have a nonprofit called the Black Talent in Design and Fashion Fund, which is, you know, supporting Black and brown students who want to continue their career, you know, studying to get into the fashion or footwear industry. So everything was kind of like a domino effect that I didn't know I was preparing myself for, because before everything happened socially, I was painting And I've never made prints of my paintings. I've always sold them, but I never made prints of them. And when I posted my first painting, someone reached out to me and was like, hey, can you make copies of this? And I was like, oh, maybe I could. So I started like selling so many prints of my paintings from like large to small to like Italy, America, like all these different places. And then when everything happened socially, and as I thought about creating a scholarship fund, I was like, oh, let me use this money from the paintings as to start the foundation of the scholarship. And for me, long story short, it went from a great time during the pandemic to being really frustrated with everything that was happening in the world. But I was happy that it was happening globally. Like there was protests in Switzerland, protests in Milan, to a silver lining of me being able to sit in these directors' faces, the directors of Timberland, like these top dogs, and be there and have conversations with them to create in this nonprofit that's now, we've awarded 15 students a scholarship with big sponsors like Target, Live New York, New Balance, Squarespace, all these places. So that was my year in a nutshell. Went from happy, sad, frustrated to finding a silver lining, doing the work and making it work,
That is amazing. I'm so happy you brought up the Black Talent Fund, because I did make a note to bring and address that, and you rolled right into it beautifully. It was awesome. I was like, I don't have to do anything. So that's super cool. 15 students. That's awesome. Hopefully that continues. 2 questions, and I'm going to try to not forget the second one after I ask the first. One, where do you gain the confidence? I think this is something that people struggle with, right? Like, where do you gain the confidence to be able to sit in front on a board of directors or whatever it is, and you're here, you're high energy, you have your perspective, but like, where do you gain the confidence to allow people to understand where you're coming from? Because like most people, when they're put into that perspective, they get really nervous. They don't know what to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing more specifically. Like that's in the top of their brain versus even saying anything. Like, how does it come naturally for you? Is it like something that you prepare for? Or like, how do you come about this?
It's a mixture of both. I think it comes naturally just because of how I was raised. Like my mom always raised us and instilled in us to just be confident in who you are, be yourself. And I feel like being myself has gotten me to where I am. Like I've always been transparent. I've always had my like crazy personality that people appreciate. And, it wasn't until like, as I get older that people really talk about the energy that I have. And, as a kid, you don't realize that you have an energy, you are who you are. So I appreciate it, like growing up in that sense. And I think that helped inspire me. Even being in spaces where I am the only Black woman, it is a bit intimidating. Like, oh crap, I don't know how they're going to perceive me, but you got to push. So that's been the most confident thing for me. And I think also just, outside of my upbringing, I mentioned to you, I was like a bit of a nerd in school. So I was like the president of my high school. Being a valedictorian in elementary school, I had to do speeches all the time to like big crowds. Like I went to a private, I don't know if you've heard of it, Hallahan Catholic Girls High School, private institution in Philly. But like, we were talking in front of the Pope and like the priest and all these things. So I'm used to speaking. So don't get me wrong, it's nerve-wracking to do it. But I think the combination of being true to yourself, at the end of the day, we're all human. And I think people are realizing that in 2020. I mean, I hope people realize that sooner, but I feel like 2020 really was the lens that people are human. People are at home working while their kid is crying. Like, we're human. So if you can break down that hierarchy of, oh, this person's a director and I'm only a designer, then we're having a face-to-face conversation. This is human to human. So you're going to hear me out, because at the end of the day, these directors are learning from me, because some of these directors haven't even worked with Black people, especially in the conversations that I was having specifically about Black Lives Matter. So they were learning from me. And I think having that energy where, they opened the door for me to be on this call, and I know that they're learning, because half of these people don't know their Black experience, So, and not that I'm the representation of that, because that's a heavy responsibility, but at least someone's saying something. So yeah, I think that's just where the confidence came. And, I think also in these years and these relationships that I built with people, I really appreciate that people respect me. So I think that layer of respect makes it easy for me to be confident.
That's awesome. I got like that entire time you were talking, I'm like, I got chill city. No, but it's so true. Like, even on a relatable subject, like for people, you know, the human element, it's like, so I talk about this all the time because I think it's so fascinating. It's like we grew up in like these pre-built hierarchy, like these tiers, the ladders that people have to climb. They're there for no reason, because at the end of the day, whether you have 45 years of experience or you have 3 years of experience, we're humans, we're people. And if you can relate and offer a different perspective where we can each learn, it doesn't really matter. And I
Right.
think that's the important part. And, you know, even for myself, like, I think that's what allows me to relate to people when I have people on my team who are way older than I am, but it just gives a different perspective because you break it down to just being people.
Right.
It's all the other shit that companies want to force into you.
People with different backgrounds, different cultures, all these things. So no matter who you meet, you're learning, that person knows something you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and then I think also between a director to a lower level, that generational learning as well. Everyone's always learning. And if there should be no person in this world who says they're never learning, because no matter how high you are in your career, you have to be learning from somebody, you know, whether it's a 5-year-old who mentioned something, like, you learn from people.
I was having dinner with a footwear designer who's super awesome. She's amazing. I'll leave names out of it, but anyway, we were talking and she's like, oh yeah, like my daughter is like 13 or something like that, and she was talking about like some of the things like she was doing. I'm like, oh, I would love to like ask her questions for like 30 minutes just to like understand where her brain's operating, because you can learn so much from that, like of where younger generations attention is going, and then you can make educated decisions that affect business. It's
Right. Exactly. That's so true.
um so my other question that I didn't want to forget, which I'm super happy I didn't forget, why what, or not why, what are your goals for the nonprofit side? I didn't want to like breeze over that and not address that, because that's awesome, right? Of like, is it you, do you have like a team around you, or like what are your, do you have goals and ambitions for it, of like, is this something that you're just doing now and you're going to pass to somebody, or are you going to like build this thing out to take over the world?
It's definitely a goal to continue building it out. So in 2020, we awarded the 15 students based off of the sponsorship through Target, and then also Lift New York. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Sarah is the founder.
Yeah. We worked with them on the soling side. They bought.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's amazing.
Yeah, she's, well, first of all, she's having production issues right now to get the shoes, but I
Yeah.
ordered a pair of them for my mom, actually.
Oh, I ordered some as well, and I've been waiting. I was like, I don't know if you have to send this to Switzerland or, and now I'm like, I'm here now. So
Yeah, all good. Yeah,
yeah, but she's amazing. She was my first sponsor, actually. And you know, in terms of the growing, so it wasn't just a 2020 thing, because at the top of the year, when New Balance you know, announced their Black History Month collection, they also announced it in collaboration with Black Talent Fund. So they're going to be sponsoring another 15 students for the year 2021. So my intent is just to continue to build that fund, so that I can continuously keep, you know, awarding students each top of the year. So that scholarship application opens in September, so that we can be able to award them again. And yeah, the way I see it growing is, you know, obviously I built it during COVID, and I would love to, you know, create like one day like a gala where, you know, all the sponsors are coming together with all the students, whether they're students or not anymore, and just create that big networking community where it's just like you can meet and have that energy. And, you know, I want to do something like that, because I was a part of an organization called BRAG, which is called the Black Retail Action Group, which I got my first internship through them. I was designing for Calvin Klein in New York. And I also got a scholarship through them. And, you know, it was backed by like celebrities through like Sean John or P. Diddy, Sean John, P. Diddy, you know, Russell Simmons, you know, all these strong Black leaders in that retail space. They're the ones who were like putting money into this organization, and they have really huge partnerships with like Macy's. Well, when Macy's was big, I don't know if it's big anymore now because of department stores are declining, but yeah, they had all their hands in. So I did like a gala with them, like, and at this gala I met so many celebrities because I was like a scholarship recipient. So I'm kind of using that as a blueprint, my experiences there, but funneling it here because my organization will include designers, where that one really didn't, even though I was a designer. But I learned like the marketing designing point of view from that internship. So yeah, long-term goal, I would like to get us all together at an event, continue building with providing scholarships. We also have the mentorship portion as well. So one of the sponsors for this year, her name is FILAR Robin. Maybe you've heard of her because you're in the footwear space. But she's like a they design a manufacturer for different brands. So she'll work for like a Keds or whatever. Then she'll have her own line. And just recently, she reached out to me and was like, "Hey, Alicia, we're hiring a design assistant. Anyone from your nonprofit, if you can give them." Give them visibility to this. So I have like a meeting on Monday with one of the students who just graduated to be like, "Hey, let me see your portfolio. I think you should apply for this." So that's just where I see it growing, just, continue to build these relationships with students after they graduate and hoping that they can get a job in these spaces that I was fortunate enough to be in. And unfortunately, I've been in these spaces where I was the only person who looked like me. And I don't want that to be the thing anymore. I want it to be like a collective of thought in these spaces.
That's awesome. So I've been talking about this a lot lately. The idea of living life in service of like for others, right? And like how fulfilling that is. And like I'm 29, I'm turning 30 in a couple, so we're not too dissimilar in age. But like I wish I discovered it earlier and like volunteering earlier. And that's why I try to keep bringing it up. So like if you can impact like somebody like in their low 20s or even in their teens of like projecting themselves in their career to like volunteer or give back or set other people up for success, it's like the most amazing feeling. And listen, like doing good things results in more good things. It's like not that hard to break down, people. So like I just like highly like just always want to highlight like anybody who's listening to just do more with their day-to-day of giving back to people, because it really does make a huge impact.
Yeah, it really is fulfilling. And especially being in this space, which typically is supposed to be a superficial world because, whatever. I mean, but for me, I don't really see it in that way. I love design. So it's creative. You're putting good energy out there. But for me, I was feeling like, wow, this is my job. I'm a designer, but what am I doing for the world outside? I mean, yes, I can look at it in a sense that I'm helping people's, what word am I looking for? Self-esteem by making sure that they can dress in cool things or whatever like that. But at the end of the day, I was always feeling like I was missing something. So I feel like 2020 helped me really define my purpose, because I've always believed in giving back. The things that I was involved in by being on student council and things like that, I was always a part of giving back. So I did feel like I was missing something. So it definitely feels fulfilling to be able to help people and, reach back where I can, because, at the end of the day, it's all about the world. It's all about that connectivity, how we can reach out and help everyone, essentially.
Yeah, it's so true. And I love that you're doing that. And for anybody listening, definitely check out your nonprofit, which is just, it's cool process that you're doing all these extracurriculars on top of your quote unquote day job, right? Going to that present day, so I'm super happy on the timing of this conversation, because you just started a new job, a new position back in the States. You mentioned it a little bit earlier in the conversation at Nike. So do you want to talk about that briefly, why you made the decision? Obviously 4 years is a decent chunk of time, like at one company, and like it sounds like they were very receptive to a lot of what you were doing and stuff like that. So like talk about what made you make the decision. Was it primarily focused on the States or in coming back home, or was the opportunity just too good to pass up?
It was a little bit of everything. And it's funny, I feel like I've been interviewing with a lot of different people on different podcasts in my role at Timberland, and you're the first person that I'm having a conversation with in this new role. And the other people that I talk to, they're like, "Yeah, Alicia, I want to talk to you now that you're at Jordan," and you're like the first person that I'm talking to.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you for that.
So the timing worked out cool. And like, I'm busy, but like my Sundays are chill right now, as I'm in this transition. But so the way that happened is actually, if I can disclose with you, is that in 2020, last year, I think I mentioned to you that I was already in that mindset of, I wanted to leave. I felt like I hit like a glass ceiling at my current or at my previous role. And, my director and my manager, they saw that and they were like, Alicia, what can we do for you? How can we, name anything, think outside of the box. What do you want from us? You're one of our top designers and we don't want to lose you. which is amazing, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
that is an awesome statement.
yes, it's so because sometimes you can be at a job and you feel unseen, you know. So the fact that my director came to me like that and my manager, I was so grateful for them. But at the same time, I was also interviewing, and I saw like different roles opened at Jordan, and I was interviewing. The interview went so amazing that they were going to fly me over to Portland to see the actual campus. But when they were getting ready to fly me over is when we found out about the coronavirus. And they were like, hey, Alicia, we wanted to fly you over. However, we've been told to stop all travel for like 2 weeks. This is when we thought that COVID would only last.
Yeah, it was going to be over real quick.
Yeah, real quick. And then from that, I never heard from them again. And then they did like layoffs. Like, you remember Nike did the whole round of layoffs like in last year? I was like, oh, they forgot about me. So at the same time as that was happening, my job, they were really great about making sure that they followed up on what we talked about in January of 2020. Even though COVID had hit, they were like, we would have these touch bases. And they were like, Alicia, you know, just map out exactly what you want and we'll make it work. So I did. And at that time, I knew that the women's design organization was growing, but I also knew that it was being designed externally. And I was like, well, this is what I want. I want to be able to work on this project. And I also want to be able to continue with collabs. I want to do all these things. And they were like, all right, so we can talk about this again in a couple of months to see how things are going. A couple of months come by, and they were like, hey, Alicia, we just want to know if you were still interested in this role because we're bringing this role in-house. And I was like, all right. So there, boom, I got promoted. And mind you, I'm forgetting about Nike because life went on. Got promoted into this new role of leading and designing the Timberland business unit of women's, which is fall 22 is going to be dropping. And it's going to be so different from any other thing that you've probably seen for Timberland women's. Because, you know, I don't know why, but globally, I feel like a lot of companies are like, oh, women, let's cater to women suddenly. You know, I think a lot of brands have been doing that. So I'm happy and very grateful that my first women's collection was through Timberland, and Timberland's first, you know, groundbreaking women's collection in-house was through me. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So, you know, I hit the ball running with that, was doing a lot of great stuff for that. And the next thing I know, Nike comes knocking on my door. And I was so confused. And like you said earlier, what do you do when you have two companies coming at you? And at this point, I went home for Christmas, and like my job, Timberland, was so amazing in allowing me to go home 2 times during the pandemic and spend like 2 months home.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're amazing because you know, the first time I went home was summer. I lost my grandfather, and I was able to be home for that because, you know, Timberland supported me so much. I really appreciate that support, and I'm still connected with them now. But then when I went home again for Christmas, you know, things are still, the momentum still driving for the fall 22 women's collection. All these great stuff is happening. And I remember I got back to Switzerland February 1st. I'm quarantining, right? And then literally around like February 13th, Nike, and mind you, this is my first time hearing from them like in a while. And they knock on my door and they're like, hey, Alicia, we just wanted to touch base with you and see how you are, you know, since we haven't heard from you in a year. And I know a lot has probably happened for you. Would you be open to a conversation with us? It will be very informal. I was like, sure, why not?
Totally.
Had a conversation with them, and like I met again with a guy who was interviewing me the last year, who's now my manager. And I just knew that they wanted me. Like I knew, and I knew that I wanted to be there. Like I felt the energy, and you know how you can just feel that connectivity, even if it's on Zoom. I felt that, and everything that I was talking about, what I wanted in my career, and you know everything they knew that I was able to do. It was just like boom, we can do it. We can do it. And for me, that made it an easy decision because number one, yes, I was in my prime at Timberland. I had just won like a big award, a global award. And I know Timberland wasn't expecting me to leave because I was in such a big momentum. I took over the Timberland Instagram account, you know, for Women's Day, got that big global hero award, like doing all these cool things. And then a month later, I told them that I was leaving, and it broke my heart to do that. But you know, I think at the end of the day, like, especially people who are listening, if you're in this space of, you know, feeling guilty about leaving companies, I think, yes, I understand that feeling, but sometimes we have to also understand you need to do what's best for you. And, you know, very bluntly, at the end of the day, working for corporations, it is a business transaction. If something happens to you, they're going to replace you the next day. So it's like, I really want to hone in that idea of doing what's best for you in totality. So I had a great momentum happening at Timberland, but I had to kind of end it abruptly because I wanted to pick back up on this conversation. And not only is it a great company, I was looking at how much I could grow within that company. Like, I'm in Jordan right now, but I can expand my growth, and I can get into footwear. I can move into all the other territories of Nike if I wanted to go to ACG or, you know, all these other departments. So Timberland's a huge name, but it's little. And you know, I grew, I really benefited off of it being that size and, you know, being who it was. But I'm really looking for, what does that next chapter, what does that long-term chapter look like for me, where I can dive into this huge pond and really explore, like you mentioned, being multidimensional as a designer. Like, I want to get into footwear, and the fact that I'm in this space of innovation and the tools and all of that, like, I said yes to them. And I literally moved my life. Well, they moved my life from Switzerland to Portland. So I moved to Portland for the first week, and then I just, I'm on the East Coast right now working from home. I'm kind of bi-coastal in a sense, as I'm, you know, solidifying stuff, moving into my actual apartment in August in Portland.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm really happy about this new chapter, this new beginning. And the way I look at it is, you know, I'm 30 years old, and the last time I was living in America, I was 23. So I was like a kid when I lived here now. And now I'm moving back as this full-blown adult, a new decade. What does that new decade look like at a huge company? Like, I'm so blown away. Like, this week I just celebrated my 1 month, and within this 1 month, I've already been on calls with like celebrities who I'm working with, and just to see how I'm hitting the ball running that quick, it goes to show that impact of this brand. Not to say that Timberland didn't have it, but the fact that I've only been here for a month.
No, it's a
in
different
conversation.
scale. Yeah, it's a different scale. I mean,
a different scale.
Nike is the biggest footwear apparel company there is. I mean, what are you going to do about it?
I'm so grateful. I'm really grateful. Yeah, so was everything. It was Nike, being home with my family. Like, the fact that I've been in like my sister's house with my nephews, for me, that's a lot, you know. That's amazing. Like, and thank God for the pandemic in a sense, because if I was to ever join Nike in the past before COVID, I would be joining Nike right in PDX, and I wouldn't have this opportunity to be home. And, you know, a lot of people, they, as much as they love Nike, especially people from like the inner city, they don't want to work for them because they know they have to move to Portland, you know? So I feel like I'm really blessed to be joining Nike in this stage, and especially Jordan, because they had an extremely high revenue year last year. And they're growing, and to be a part of this team that's growing, it's kind of like a repeat of how they built the Timberland team when I joined. They're doing it now for Jordan. So I'm again in this new wave for Jordan now, because they're in this growing space. I'm like, wow, I keep being a part of history with these companies.
Yeah.
So.
I'm so excited for you in the next decade of your life, because it's just going to be super fun to watch. And hopefully our listeners do end up following your journey. You know, they'll catch you. Maybe, I don't even think you've reached your prime. I think you're still young. So hopefully they catch you early. I mean, I've only known you for a few months too, so I'm excited just in general to like learn and watch. Do you have like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan or anything like that, or you just kind of go with it?
I've literally just been kind of going with it. I realized going with it, and I can be a planner, but I realized going with it has brought me all these crazy blessings that I didn't even see coming. Like, sometimes you can dream so little, and it's like God will laugh at you and be like, ha, you were thinking that small, but I had this for you. So, you know, that has, I mean, obviously I have an idea of what I want to do. I told you that, you know, I took the Nike job because I know I can tap into footwear, you know, the innovation part, you know. So those are kind of long-term goals, but I can't tell you like black and white, like, okay, I'm going to do this, do that. Because literally, I had no idea I'll be on a call with like this huge name celebrity like last week. Like, so I don't know where life is taking me. I'm literally just enjoying the journey and the people who are, you know, blessing me with these opportunities at the same time.
That's so great to hear. So a couple more questions for you, and then I want to be respectful of your time. Where exactly can people follow along your journey? What are your tags? Where are you like most like, are you on Instagram primarily? Do you have Twitter, TikTok? Where do you live in the social world?
I live in Instagram, and I feel like am I an old person because I downloaded the TikTok thing, but I can't get into that. And then I also have Facebook, but it's just a lot of socials to manage. So my main thing is Instagram, love_PINCK. And obviously I have my nonprofit socials as well, but I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm also on LinkedIn actually, but that's not really social. So Instagram and LinkedIn are my two main socials, and then also the Black Talent Fund. Instagram is Black Talent Fund. That's it, just Black Talent Fund.
Nice.
That's where I live.
Amazing. So everybody listening, please go follow her and her amazing journey. That's she's still on the projectile up into the moon. So follow along. Last question. If you had to leave one piece of advice or one statement or anything as a message to any of our listeners or viewers who have watched this hour-long conversation, what would it be?
I would definitely say believe in yourself. And if that means cultivating the confidence, whether you have it or not, just learn how to believe in yourself and don't oversaturate it with ego, because, in this space, especially in design, sometimes I mentioned earlier on about that conversation about validation and not feeling worthy enough. Continue to believe in yourself and do it in an authentic way where there's less ego, but you still, you know what you have to offer. So definitely believe in yourself, and it will take you really far.
That's awesome. And I'm definitely hearing more and more like on even guests that I have conversations with on here. It seems like ego is or not the lack of is actually like a huge staple for a lot of creatives of like, as soon as you eliminate that, you're coming from a more authentic, like you say, perspective.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
So Alicia, thank you so much for your time on joining us for episode 43 of An Untold Narrative. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it too.